Tessa Majors. On December 11, 2019, 18-year-old Tessa Majors, a Barnard College freshman, walked through Morningside Park near Columbia University. The Virginia native had moved to New York to study journalism and play bass in a band called Patient Zero. She navigated the busy streets with the confidence of someone embracing city life. That Wednesday evening around 7, she chose a route through the park she had safely walked before. But 3 teenagers also entered the park that night with dark intentions. 14-year-old Rashawn Weaver, 14-year-old Luciano Lewis, and a 13-year-old accomplice were hunting for a target. They cornered Tessa on a staircase for her phone and cash. When she bravely fought back, the robbery quickly turned fatal. Weaver stabbed her repeatedly in the chest, but during the struggle, Tessa bit one of her attackers, leaving behind vital evidence. Screaming for help, she dragged herself up the stairs toward the street before collapsing. Passers-by heard her cries and called 911. She was rushed to Mount St. Luke's Hospital but died shortly after. The sheer randomness of the attack deeply shocked the Columbia community and raised urgent questions about park safety in Manhattan. How did investigators track down 3 young suspects in a city of millions? Security cameras captured footage of individuals matching the suspects' clothing near the park around the time of the assault. The 13-year-old was identified and arrested the very next day, quickly pointing detectives to his accomplices. Forensic testing of crime scene evidence revealed DNA under Tessa's fingernails and a bite mark linking Weaver and Lewis. While the DNA under her fingernails directly matched Rashawn Weaver, the physical bite mark was actually found on Weaver's own finger inflicted by Tessa, rather than being evidence left behind at the scene. Luciano Lewis was linked by the 13-year-old's confession and security footage. The investigation team worked tirelessly, combing through hundreds of tips from the public. Detectives scanned hours of security camera footage from across the neighborhood, tracing the suspects' paths before and after the murder. Cell phone records placed them nearby at the crucial moment. This mix of digital and physical evidence built an airtight case against all 3 teens. Ultimately, investigators realized the attack was entirely opportunistic. The 3 boys had absolutely no prior connection to Tessa. They went into the park simply looking for a victim, and she crossed their path. This utter lack of motive made the tragedy incredibly difficult for her family and the community to accept. Weaver and Lewis were indicted, facing legal trials between 2020 and 2022. In the end, all 3 defendants pleaded guilty. The 13-year-old got 18 months in juvenile detention, while Lewis was handed 9 years to life. Weaver received 14 years to life. At his sentencing, Weaver spoke to the courtroom, calling his own actions selfish. Tessa's heartbroken family read impact statements, expressing deep grief and calling out the killer's lack of genuine remorse. Her father spoke of a daughter who would never graduate, build her journalism career, or raise her own family. The case ignited fierce debates surrounding violent youth crime and how the justice system handles underage offenders. Many argued the sentences were far too harsh considering their young age, while others believed they properly reflected the gravity of taking a life during a violent robbery. In 2025, Weaver made headlines again during an incident at Rikers Island, proving his ongoing behavioral struggles. Meanwhile, Barnard and Columbia heavily increased security around Morningside Park to protect their students. They installed brighter lighting, added patrols, and urged students to walk in groups through isolated areas of the campus. Today, Tessa's legacy lives on through her music and the early journalism she crafted during her short college life. But while Tessa's case was a tragic random crime, let's take a look at a time decades earlier when New York faced a different kind of terror: the Son of Sam. Between July 1976 and July 1977, the city was terrorized by a gunman targeting young couples parked in cars. The shooter armed himself with a .44 caliber revolver, striking at random across several city boroughs. 6 lives were violently cut short, while 7 others survived their wounds. He called himself the Son of Sam in bizarre letters mailed to police and newspapers. Who was this monster terrorizing the streets? What drove this madness? It began on July 29, 1976, as Donna Lauria and Jody Valenti sat parked in the Bronx. A stranger walked up to the car and fired through the window. Donna died instantly, but Jody miraculously survived the gunfire. For the next year, Terror struck Queens, Brooklyn, and the Bronx. The shooter targeted students, young lovers, and unsuspecting teens. This absolute randomness gripped the entire city with paralyzing fear. The shooter taunted police and columnist Jimmy Breslin with letters, claiming he would return and signing off as Mr. Monster. His messages revealed a deeply disturbed mind who fed on public attention and sheer panic. Detectives launched a massive task force, yet they struggled to find any solid suspects despite ballistics and sketches. The ultimate breakthrough came from a completely unexpected clue. On July 31st, 1977, the killer struck for the last time in Brooklyn, shooting Stacy Moskowitz and Robert Violante in their car. Stacy passed away, while Robert survived but lost his vision in one eye. Nearby, a woman walking her dog noticed a suspicious man removing a parking ticket from a vehicle parked near the crime scene. She quickly shared this crucial detail with investigators, who traced that ticket to a car registered to David Berkowitz in Yonkers. A simple traffic citation became the key to unlocking the mystery. Police drove straight to the suspect's registered home address, expecting yet another frustrating dead end in this exhausting manhunt. Instead, they spotted Berkowitz's car sitting right on the street and peered inside. They saw a Commando Mark III .45 caliber rifle and an envelope addressed to Sergeant Dow of the Omega Precinct. This blatant evidence lying in plain sight gave the officers immediate cause to move in. On August 10th, police closed in on Berkowitz of 1977, finding the .44 caliber revolver in his car. When cornered, Berkowitz reportedly confessed immediately, telling officers they had finally caught him. His arrest instantly relieved a city frozen in terror for over a year. But what truly drove his actions? Born Richard David Falco in 1953, he was adopted and raised in the Bronx. He faced brutal bullying and showed early signs of pyromania. By adulthood, he was working for the Postal Service, living a quiet, lonely life in Yonkers. At first, Berkowitz claimed that demons commanded him to kill, speaking through his neighbor's barking dog. This outlandish tale immediately dominated the media headlines. Years later, Berkowitz admitted the dog story was a complete hoax. Instead, he blamed his actions on crushing loneliness and a deep hatred for society. He targeted young couples because they represented the normal life he was locked out of. He later confessed that deep-seated misogyny and dark revenge fantasies fueled his violence. Bitterly angry at women and rejected by peers, the shootings finally gave him the sick power and attention he desired. Some investigators have looked into theories that Berkowitz belonged to a satanic cult, claiming accomplices helped him shoot his victims, but these chilling conspiracies remain unproven and highly debated. In May 1978, Berkowitz pleaded guilty and received 6 consecutive life sentences. He has remained behind bars ever since. Every single parole request has been denied, including in 2024. He remains locked away at Shawangunk Correctional Facility. Throughout his long decades in prison, Berkowitz has expressed regret and claimed a devout religious conversion. He has often agreed to interviews and documentaries exploring his dark past. His horrific crimes forced police departments to rewrite their investigation playbooks and completely changed how the media reports on active manhunts. It also led to the landmark Son of Sam law in New York, which prevents violent criminals from making money off their stories, a rule tested decades later when gang dynamics sparked another senseless tragedy. Lesandro Guzman Feliz. On June 20th, 2018, 15-year-old Landro Guzman Feliz, known as Junior, was chased into a Bronx bodega by armed gang members. The terrified teen begged store employees for help, but his pursuers dragged him back out. The horrifying events that followed were caught on security footage, sparking massive outrage. Why was this young boy targeted? Let's see what the footage revealed. Junior belonged to the NYPD Explorers, a youth program for kids aiming for law enforcement careers. He dreamed of one day becoming a detective. That night, he was walking near his Bronx home when members of the Trinitarios gang spotted him. 14 gang members hunted him through the streets. He bolted into a bodega, desperate for safety. The video showed Junior begging store workers for protection before the gang dragged him back outside. On the sidewalk, they attacked him with machetes and knives. Jonake Martinez Estrella delivered a fatal stab to the neck. Despite his horrific wounds, Junior managed to run toward a hospital several blocks away, collapsing outside St. Barnabas Hospital. He passed away shortly after. The horrifying footage spread rapidly online, sparking a massive wave of public fury. The hashtag Justice for Junior trended nationwide as shocked communities reacted to the brutal attack and his futile search for safety. The graphic video showed more than just the attack. It exposed how store workers failed to step in or even call the police during the confrontation. Doctors later revealed that the boy might have survived had someone given him immediate medical aid, making his death even more tragic. Street cameras tracked his entire agonizing run to the hospital as he bled out. But why did they target him? The investigation soon uncovered a tragic case of mistaken identity. The gang members believed Junior belonged to a rival crew known as Sunset. This fatal error likely started with a video online that they completely misunderstood. In reality, Junior had no gang ties. His involvement with the NYPD explorers represented the exact opposite of gang life. The gang murdered an innocent kid based on nothing but a lie. The viral security footage helped investigators identify the suspects almost immediately. Locals flooded the police with tips, and arrests started within days. Soon, all 14 suspects were charged. The 2019 trials ended in convictions. Martinez Estrella and others got 25 years to life, though some sentences were later reduced on appeal. As of January 2026, Junichi Martinez Estrella remains locked away, serving 25 years to life in a high-security New York State prison. The tragedy exposed how ruthless gangs recruit kids in struggling neighborhoods. It sparked loud demands for community programs that could give kids a way out of gang life. Junior's tragic death became a powerful rallying cry against street violence across the entire city. Our next story shifts from concrete streets to the dark reality of online obsession. Bianca Debon. In July 2019, 17-year-old Bianca Debons went to a concert in New York with Brandon Clark, a 21-year-old she met online. Bianca was highly active online, where she built a large following and made many close friends. During the show, she kissed someone else, a simple act that triggered a deadly reaction from Clark. The horror that followed showed the true danger of online obsession. Once the concert was over, Clark drove Bianca away in his car. Their actual relationship was highly complicated. Clark thought they were dating, but Bianca just saw him as a friend. His dark jealousy was growing worse, but no one realized how deep his obsession went until it was far too late. Clark pulled over in Utica, New York, attacking Bianca with a knife and inflicting devastating, fatal wounds. After taking her life, but Brandon Clark took this horror to a dark new level. He photographed her lifeless body and uploaded the pictures to Discord, a messaging app popular with gamers, attaching a cruel caption that read, "Sorry, fuckers." Right after, he tried to end his own life. Panicked Discord users saw the gruesome photos, realized the danger, and immediately called emergency services. Officers tracked down Clark's vehicle and found him bleeding from self-inflicted wounds. He survived to face arrest. There, police found Bianca's body. The rapid spread of those horrific photos unleashed what her family called a never-ending nightmare. Even though they fought to scrub the images online, the pictures kept resurfacing on different sites, tormenting her family with every single repost. Bianca's mother described this endless digital torment as psychological terrorism, a cruel extension of the original murder. Her relatives constantly begged social platforms to take them down, forced to watch strangers exploit their daughter's death for cheap clicks and online harassment. Cruel trolls even made fake accounts to send the photos directly to them, weaponizing the web. Why did Clark do it? The investigation exposed a motive of toxic, obsessive jealousy. He simply couldn't tolerate Bianca having her own life and friends. When she kissed another guy at a concert, he felt betrayed, though he had zero right to control her. Publishing those images was his sick way of punishing her in public, even after stealing her young life, revealing a terrifying level of narcissism and control. Clark ultimately pleaded guilty, receiving a prison sentence of 25 years to life. Court hearings revealed a chaotic childhood filled with domestic violence and trauma. Still, nothing justified his cold, calculated actions, and Bianca's death sparked real political change. Her family fought hard for laws forcing social media sites to delete violent content immediately. They introduced Bianca's Law in New York to mandate strict content filters for graphic victim photos. Let's look at the broader warning here about unhealthy online obsessions, where one person develops dangerous feelings, and the massive failure of tech platforms. Now, let's turn to a predator who stalked the shadows for decades, the Gilgo Beach serial killer. In December 2010, a police officer searching for missing Shannon Gilbert stumbled upon skeletal remains along Long Island's Ocean Parkway. What started as a single search soon revealed a horrifying serial killer dumping ground. Within months, detectives unearthed 10 sets of remains along that isolated coast, showing someone had been dumping bodies there for years. Just how long had this monster gone unnoticed? Most of the victims were female escorts who advertised their services online. They included Megan Waterman, Amber Costello, Melissa Bartholomew, and Maureen Brainerd Barnes. Many victims were wrapped in burlap and bound, pointing to a single systematic killer. The disappearances spanned 1993 to 2011, proving the killer was active for decades. Yet the cold case dragged on for years. The remote beach and transient lifestyles made tracking clues nearly impossible. Delayed missing persons reports also stopped detectives from connecting the dots early on. This mystery seemed destined to join the ranks of unsolved serial murders. But in 2023, police arrested Rex Heuermann, a middle-aged architect from Massapequa Park. How did they finally link him to murders from decades past? Forensic science had advanced rapidly since those early discoveries. Detectives re-evaluated the old evidence using advanced DNA matching. They ran mitochondrial DNA tests on tiny hairs found on the victims. One hair found on Megan Waterman's burlap wrap matched DNA from Heuermann's wife, and a hair found on Amber Costello matched Heuermann himself, linked directly to DNA recovered from a discarded pizza crust. Together, you and I can see how modern DNA testing is solving cold cases once thought impossible. Investigators also combed through old cell phone logs and internet activity. They uncovered horrific searches for sadistic violence and ways to hide bodies. This digital trail, paired with DNA evidence, gave detectives their suspect. Police also tracked his coordinates through old cell tower pings, placing his phone near the dump sites right when victims vanished. Together, the physical and digital clues finally exposed his dark, decades-long double life. Soon, Heuermann faced multiple charges in the murders of 7 women. He target-selected vulnerable women, hoping their disappearances would simply slip under the radar. Choosing vulnerable sex workers and using isolated dump sites pointed to cold, calculated planning. In 2025, the court moved to split the charges after discovering more victims, specifically the remains found in Manorville, paving the way for multiple separate trials. The case raised chilling questions about how a normal professional led a decades-long double life. Heuermann lived with his family in suburbia while working as a Manhattan architect, completely escaping suspicion until forensic technology caught up. Stunned neighbors described him as quiet and unremarkable. The Gilgo Beach case also exposed how current systems fail to protect sex workers. Activists pointed to the case as proof that crimes against marginalized victims get ignored. Catching Heuermann only happened because of massive leaps in DNA tech and cold case dedication. While the Long Island murders involved the calculated hunting of vulnerable targets, the next tragedy struck a woman who was just out for a run, Karina Vetrano. On August 2, 2016, 30-year-old Karina Vetrano went for a jog along her usual Queens Park trail. Her dad typically ran with her, but he was busy that evening, so she went alone, sending her dad a quick love text before heading out. When she did not return, panic set in. Something had gone terribly wrong on that routine evening jog. Her father rushed out to search, only to find her body hidden in the park marsh. She had been brutally assaulted and strangled. The autopsy revealed she fought back fiercely against her killer, even cracking her teeth while biting her attacker. But she left detectives a vital clue: DNA trapped right under her fingernails. The purely random attack sent shockwaves of terror through Queens. She had zero enemies or conflicts. She was just a young woman exercising in a public park. The chilling thought of a predator lurking in the park made the community fear for their safety. Despite having the killer's DNA, months passed with absolutely no suspects. Investigators searched everywhere and interviewed dozens of men, but none matched the genetic profile. The file was nearly cold when detectives decided to try a highly unusual tactic. They went door to door, asking local men to voluntarily provide their DNA. It sparked serious privacy concerns, but this controversial tactic led to a massive breakthrough. Chanel Lewis, a 20-year-old Brooklyn man, voluntarily gave a sample that matched the crime scene DNA. In February 2017, 6 months after the murder, Lewis was arrested. During interrogation, he confessed, claiming he was just angry that day and Karina simply crossed his path. The sheer senselessness of the motive made the tragedy unbearable. She died simply for crossing paths with a raging stranger. His first trial in 2018 ended in a hung jury, as some questioned the harsh interrogation tactics used to get his confession. The retrial in 2019 resulted in a conviction, and Lewis was sentenced to life without parole. His background revealed a history of mental health struggles and deep social isolation. He lived with his mother and couldn't keep a job, but had no violent criminal history. Targeting Karina was purely random, pointing to an impulsive act rather than a calculated pattern. Yet psychiatric experts still found him competent to stand trial. Karina's tragic case forced authorities to ramp up security in Spring Creek Park, including brighter lighting and more frequent patrols. Her family became vocal advocates for park safety and support for other victims. The devastated community held emotional vigils and races, celebrating her vibrant life while mourning her tragic death. Local running clubs established strict safety protocols, emphasizing group runs and solo check-in systems. If these deep dives into shocking, mysterious criminal cases keep you hooked, please hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon. Not all predators operate in the dark. Some hide behind ordinary faces in plain sight. July 11, 2011. An 8-year-old boy named Leiby Kletzky left his day camp in Borough Park, Brooklyn, hoping to walk home alone for the first time. His parents allowed this milestone to foster independence, mapping out a very specific, careful route. The tight-knit neighborhood felt incredibly safe, with familiar faces waiting on every corner. Little Leiby knew he could easily ask for help if needed, but when he became disoriented and asked the wrong stranger for directions, a routine walk home turned into a parent's ultimate nightmare. How did a brief moment of confusion trigger such terror? Leiby missed a turn and got lost on the neighborhood streets. Feeling anxious, the young boy approached a man and asked for help. That man was 35-year-old Levi Aaron, who lived alone in a nearby apartment. Aaron offered to help Leiby, inviting him inside to wait while they figured out where he needed to go. Instead of immediately calling Leiby's family or walking him home, Aaron kept the boy inside. When Leiby failed to return, his panicked parents contacted the police. The tight-knit community mobilized within hours, organizing massive search parties that scoured the neighborhood all through the night. Volunteers handed out flyers, checked security footage, and interviewed anyone who might have seen the boy. Their swift action showed incredible solidarity, but precious time was already slipping away. Surveillance cameras from local businesses captured footage of Leiby walking with a man later identified as Aaron. Detectives traced Aaron's identity through license plate readers and headed straight to his residence. When officers arrived on July 13th, they discovered sickening proof that Leiby had been inside. A search revealed the boy's remains had been dismembered, with parts found in Aaron's freezer and others in a dumpster. Why would anyone harm a lost child who asked for help? Aaron's background offered some context, but no satisfying explanation. He had suffered a severe head injury years earlier and struggled with social interaction throughout his life. He lived a quiet, solitary life, working odd jobs including a stint at a local hardware store. Neighbors described him as a bit strange, but never dangerous. During police interviews, Aaron claimed he panicked when he realized the massive community search was underway. Instead of releasing Leiby safely, which would have been incredibly simple, Aaron made a catastrophic choice. Medical examiners suggested Aaron had given Leiby a mix of medications, likely to keep him subdued. The autopsy confirmed these toxic substances in the boy's system. The gruesome dismemberment appeared to be a desperate attempt to hide evidence. Aaron's apartment contained extensive cleaning supplies consistent with trying to wipe away all traces of the crime. Aaron was charged and faced trial, eventually pleading guilty in 2012 to avoid execution. He was sentenced to 40 years to life in prison. Psychological evaluations noted his history of mental illness, though he was deemed competent to face trial. Aaron reported experiencing hallucinations and claimed voices told him to do it. While those claims were highly debated, the Borough Park community was completely devastated. Parents who once encouraged independence suddenly reconsidered letting their kids walk alone. The tragedy prompted deep conversations about safety in communities that had always felt safe from danger. By January 2026, Levi Aaron was serving his 40-year-to-life term at Sullivan Correctional Facility. From a chance encounter in Brooklyn to a mother's calculated actions in suburban New York, this was Garnett Spears. In January 2014, 5-year-old Garnett Spears was admitted to Nyack Hospital in New York with unusual symptoms, including seizures and toxic sodium levels. Throughout his short life, the little boy endured a long history of medical issues, requiring constant hospital stays and treatments. His mother, Leslie Spears, seemed entirely devoted to his care, sharing detailed blogs about his illness. Yet, hospital doctors soon noticed disturbing inconsistencies in the boy's medical files. What those doctors uncovered would expose a deeply disturbing pattern. Was it possible a mother was intentionally making her child sick? Since birth, Garnett had been in and out of hospitals, suffering from a strange mix of unexplained symptoms. Leslie built a massive online following by documenting his struggles, constantly drawing sympathy and support from her readers. She painted herself as a tireless, loving mother desperate to save her ailing little boy. But his medical files showed a cycle of symptoms that would flare up, get treated, and mysteriously return. During his stay at Nyack Hospital, doctors noticed that Garnett's sodium levels spiked dangerously high with no clear explanation, prompting staff to monitor him closely. Hospital surveillance cameras caught Leslie slipping into Garnett's room with feeding bags, appearing to tamper with his tube. The video provided critical evidence supporting what investigators feared. Garnett's sodium levels reached lethal levels, causing severe brain swelling. He passed away on January 23, 2014. Medical examiners ruled the death a homicide, concluding that massive amounts of salt were intentionally given doses no child could ever consume by accident. What began as a medical mystery quickly became a murder investigation. Detectives dug into Garnett's lengthy medical records, discovering that almost none of his past sicknesses had any real physical cause. Doctors who previously treated him looked back, realizing how his reported symptoms constantly clashed with actual test results. Every clue pointed to the same horrifying fact. Someone was deliberately making him sick. Looking into Leslie Spears' background provided crucial context. She exhibited classic signs of Munchausen syndrome by proxy, a disorder where a caregiver makes a child sick to gain attention. Her active online profile documented every single hospital stay, every medical test, and every treatment, feeding off the sympathy of online communities. The worse Garnett's health seemed to get, the more attention her posts received. Leslie was arrested and charged with second-degree murder and first-degree manslaughter. At her trial in 2015, prosecutors presented the security footage, medical testimony proving the salt levels could never be accidental, and evidence from her online posts. Medical experts explained Munchausen by proxy and how this disorder drove her horrifying behavior. Her lawyers tried to argue that Garnett's issues were real, portraying Leslie as a loving mother wrongfully accused. But the surveillance footage and expert medical findings were ultimately too overwhelming. In April 2015, Leslie Spears was convicted and handed 20 years to life in prison. At sentencing, the judge condemned the ultimate breach of trust when a parent harms their own child. Leslie Spears remains locked up at Bedford Hills Correctional Facility. Though she was originally handed 20 years to life, her sentence later underwent review. Her earliest parole eligibility remains May 2034. If that case was about abuse hidden as care, this next story sparked fierce debates over public safety and overreach. On May 1, 2023, 30-year-old Jordan Neely was riding a Manhattan subway train when he began behaving erratically. Neely was unhoused and dealing with severe mental health issues, a well-known face in the subways where he often danced as a Michael Jackson impersonator. That afternoon, riders reported he was screaming that he was hungry, thirsty, and ready to die. A 24-year-old former Marine named Daniel Penny grabbed Neely from behind and put him in a hold. What followed would split the public and trigger fierce arguments about mental illness, crime, and street safety, and the limits of civilian intervention. Passenger video showed Penny keeping Neely in a tight chokehold for several minutes at a subway station, while other commuters stepped in to help pin down the distressed man's arms. Neely eventually blacked out and died, with the medical examiner later pointing to neck compression as the cause. Penny finally let go when the movement stopped, but by then, Neely was completely unresponsive. Paramedics tried desperately to revive him, but they failed. The incident immediately triggered a massive public debate. To some, Penny was a protector, defending passengers from a deeply unstable threat. To others, it was brutal, lethal force against a sick man who hadn't touched anyone. With Neely being black and Penny white, a heavy racial divide fractured the city, with many viewing the death as yet another senseless act of violence against a vulnerable black man. But who was Jordan Neely, and what brought him to that subway floor? Years earlier, Jordan had been a beloved street performer, famous for his energetic Michael Jackson tributes in Times Square and underground platforms. Commuters knew his face, and he even appeared in documentaries. But behind the dancing lay a life shattered by immense personal trauma. When he was just a teenager, his mother was brutally murdered, a trauma that broke his mental health forever. In the dark years that followed, he slipped into homelessness, battling severe psychiatric conditions without any real help. By 2023, his arrest record had grown, mostly for minor offenses fueled by his untreated illness and life on the streets. He kept rotating through jails and hospitals, never finding the long-term care he desperately needed. To advocates, his tragic story was a textbook example of a system failing those in crisis. Daniel Penny's life looked entirely different. Born around 1999 and raised in Suffolk County, Penny served as a Marine sergeant from 2017 to 2021, where he learned restraint tactics. When the subway encounter occurred, he was a college student studying architecture. In later interviews, Penny claimed Neely possessed unnatural strength and insisted he was only trying to shield the terrified crowd from harm. The courtroom battle quickly became a national debate over vigilantism, mental illness, and self-defense. Penny faced serious charges, including second-degree manslaughter and criminally negligent homicide. The prosecution argued his force was excessive, keeping Neely in a chokehold long after any threat had faded. The state medical examiner officially ruled the death a homicide from neck compression. Defense attorneys strongly fought the ruling. They brought in experts pointing to other factors, like drug use and sickle cell trait, as potential causes. They framed Penny as a brave Good Samaritan, stepping up to shield helpless riders from a ticking time bomb. They argued his Marine training taught him to neutralize threats safely, and that his actions were completely reasonable. In December 2024, the jury deadlocked, forcing a mistrial on the charge of second-degree manslaughter. But he was fully acquitted of criminally negligent homicide. Prosecutors later hinted at a retrial on the remaining count in 2025 or 2026. From a subway confrontation to a cold, calculated plot of dismemberment and lies. In June 2018, 26-year-old Brandy Odom was reported missing from her Queens apartment. The young woman worked in the local sex industry and was linked to Corey Martin, a predatory figure who controlled women in that dark underworld. When police began investigating her disappearance, they had almost no clues. Then, in 2020, scattered human remains began appearing in Canarsie Park, Brooklyn. This gruesome discovery exposed a chilling, cold-blooded murder-for-hire plot designed around life insurance fraud and cover-up tips from television crime dramas. What drove a man to such cold, calculated violence? Corey Martin, born around 1988, maintained a highly abusive and exploitative relationship with Brandy. He exerted total control over her work on the streets. Eventually, Martin secretly took out $200,000 in life insurance on Brandy, naming himself sole beneficiary. This massive payday would drive his horrifying next steps. In June 2018, Martin strangled Brandy inside a Queens home, then cold-bloodedly dismembered her corpse. The most disturbing detail of this crime was the sheer level of planning involved. Martin studied dark methods of dismemberment and body disposal, watching dramas like Dexter, studying how a fictional killer scrubbed his crime scenes clean. He also binged The First 48, a real-life homicide show, desperate to learn how to dodge detectives. Martin scattered Brandy's remains across several locations, dumping most in Canarsie Park. When human remains surfaced in 2020, a massive investigation began. Forensic teams used dental records and fingerprints to identify the grisly remains as Brandy. Detectives started digging into her past, quickly narrowing their sights on Martin. A massive life insurance policy revealed a clear motive. Martin had filed claims to cash in, lying that she died of natural causes. But insurance adjusters grew deeply suspicious of the payout and the timing. They immediately flagged their concerns to police, handing over vital leads that reshaped the entire investigation. Police arrested Martin alongside his girlfriend, who had helped him cover up the crime. In the interrogation room and court, details emerged of his TV habits, showing how he tried copying fictional murder techniques in real life. Prosecutors used this to prove his cold, calculated premeditation. In March 2024, a federal jury found Corey Martin guilty of murdering Brandy Odom. That August, he received a mandatory life sentence for murder for hire and wire fraud conspiracy. While Martin preyed on a vulnerable victim, the next case shattered a family's sanctuary right inside their own home. This is the tragic Krim case. On October 25, 2012, Marina Krim returned to her upscale Manhattan apartment with her young daughter. She expected her other two children, Leo and Lucia, to be safe with their nanny, Jocelyn Ortega. Instead, she walked into a nightmare that would scar her forever. Her children had been brutally attacked, and Ortega lay nearby, bleeding from a self-inflicted wound. How could a trusted guardian do this? The apartment was a bloody, chaotic crime scene. Marina found her little ones stabbed multiple times, their injuries utterly fatal. Ortega was huddled in the bathroom, having turned the very knives used on the children onto herself. First responders rushed into pure chaos, trying to save the bleeding children and stabilize the nanny. The Krim family had trusted Ortega as their nanny for nearly 2 years. Born in 1962 in the Dominican Republic, Ortega was a naturalized citizen working in childcare, living quietly with her son, sister, and niece. To the family and everyone around her, she seemed incredibly gentle and reliable. Absolutely nothing hinted at the horror she would commit, but the investigation soon uncovered a deep, simmering resentment. Ortega secretly stewed over her wages and exhausting work hours. She felt completely unvalued, even though her employers thought their bond was excellent. This massive gap between her fake smile and silent rage meant the family had zero warning of her crumbling mental state. Ortega was battling severe depression and anxiety, dark struggles she hid from her employers. She never sought professional counseling and never uttered a word about her inner pain to the family. Whether psychiatric help could have prevented this nightmare is a question that will haunt forever. That toxic mix of hidden madness and quiet jealousy was a ticking time bomb. Ultimately, Ortega survived the self-inflicted slashes to her own throat. Justice dragged slowly, with her murder trial finally kicking off in 2018. Her lawyers pushed hard for an insanity defense, claiming she suffered a psychotic break and could not tell right from wrong. Psychiatric experts clashed on the stand, giving wildly conflicting testimony. But prosecutors argued she knew exactly what she was doing, driven entirely by bitter resentment. They pointed to her careful prep work and chilling timing as proof of cold premeditation. She waited patiently for Marina to leave with only one of her kids, leaving the other two vulnerable, pointing to calculated planning rather than a sudden breakdown. In April 2018, the jury rejected Ortega's insanity defense and convicted her. She was sentenced to life without parole at the Bedford Hills Correctional Facility. It was a sentence that reflected the deliberate, cruel targeting of the vulnerable children in her care. She had rejected a plea deal of 30 years to life, choosing instead to face a trial. Through every agonizing court date, the Krim family endured unimaginable grief. Since then, Marina Krim has dedicated her life to advocating for early childhood education and mental health. The grieving family established foundations to honor the children's memory. From a nanny's bitter rage, the scene shifts to upstate New York and a doctor's calculated cover-up. On September 17, 2012, emergency dispatchers in DeWitt, New York, answered a call reporting a tragic accident. Dr. Robert Nulander, a prominent obstetrician-gynecologist, reported his wife Leslie had slipped in their bathroom and hit her head. Paramedics arrived only to find Leslie Nulander already deceased from severe head trauma. At first, authorities accepted his story as a tragic accident. But an anonymous letter sent to the medical examiner would soon unravel his carefully constructed story. What really happened in that bathroom? Leslie Nulander, 61 years old, had been married to Robert for decades. The couple seemed to have a stable marriage, standing as respected members of the Syracuse community. Robert ran a successful medical practice, and they had raised their children together. From the outside, there was no motive for foul play. But investigators soon discovered a deeply strained marriage. Robert was drowning in financial trouble, and a divorce was looming. These secrets were hidden from their friends. The perfect facade of a happy marriage masked a toxic tension that would prove fatal. A forensic examination of the scene raised immediate red flags. Blood spatter on the walls and their headboard flatly contradicted the story of a bathroom slip. Leslie's injuries pointed to brutal, repeated, blunt force trauma rather than a single accidental fall in the shower. The physical evidence strongly suggested she was actually attacked in the bedroom, not the bathroom. Once classified as an accident, the file was reopened when an anonymous tip urged investigators to look deeper. The letter laid out evidence suggesting Robert had the motive and opportunity. This sparked a deep review of all evidence with forensic experts, leading to Robert Nulander's arrest for second-degree murder. The prosecution built their case on detailed blood spatter analysis and medical testimony describing Leslie's horrific injuries. They painted Robert as a desperate husband who murdered his wife to avoid a costly divorce, then staged the scene. The 2015 trial ended in a conviction, but it was later overturned due to serious juror misconduct. A single juror conducted outside research, sharing forbidden details with the rest of the panel during their secret deliberations. This shocking reversal forced a complete retrial. After his second trial in 2022, Robert Nulander was sentenced to 19 years to life. In 2024, the state's highest court upheld the conviction, exhausting his final appeals. He still maintains his innocence, but the overwhelming forensic evidence and clear motive were more than enough to convict him. As of 2026, he remains behind bars. That is the story for today. Thanks for watching. Click here for more.